Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive? You guys sent in a question that's honestly been around forever. Is homosexuality a choice? We're digging into research, personal stories, even some Kinsey Institute stuff. Let's go.
And yeah, you're right. It's a loaded question. We've got biology to think about, psychology, history, different cultures. It's not just a simple yes or no.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
So let's start with the science. We found research talking about genetics, hormones even before you're born, even different brain structures in gay and straight people.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if it's like built in, right?
It does, and there's definitely some evidence pointing in that direction. Like there are those twin studies. Have you heard of those? They look at identical twins, separated at birth even, and they're still more likely to share the same sexual orientation than twins who aren't identical. That kind of points to a strong genetic link.
Makes sense. But what about those brain studies? I've heard about those, but what are scientists actually seeing there?
Well, they're looking at a specific part of the brain. It's called the hypothalamus. It's tiny, but it's super important for like sexual behavior. And guess what? Some studies have found that the hypothalamus actually looks different in gay men compared to straight men. Suggests there's a biological basis there.
Huh. So does that mean it's settled then? Nature over nurture?
It's not that cut and dry. Biology is definitely a foundation, but it's not the whole story. Environment plays a role too, just not always in the way people think.
Okay, now I'm really curious. What do you mean? How does environment fit in?
Think of it like this. Your genes are like the blueprint, right? But then your life experiences, how you were raised, social stuff, it all kind of interacts with that blueprint. And all of that together shapes who we are, our sexuality included.
So it's not like you're born this way or it's a choice. It's more this mix of things.
Totally. It's definitely more nuanced than either extreme. It's about how complex humans are, you know?
Sure. So where does psychology come into all of this? We've got the whole conversion therapy thing, which seems like a big fail.
Yeah, and the American Psychological Association is pretty clear on that. There's just no proof that being gay or straight is a choice. Trying to force someone to change through therapy doesn't work and could actually be really harmful.
Right. It's like trying to choose to be taller. It just doesn't work like that. Speaking of assumptions, we came across the Kinsey scale in our research. Think you could break that down for us?
Oh, the Kinsey scale is fascinating. It really challenges the idea that you're either gay or straight, period. Kinsey, who is like a pioneer in this whole sex research field, he said sexuality is more fluid, more like a spectrum.
So instead of just two boxes, it's like a sliding scale of who you're attracted to.
Right.
That definitely makes things more interesting.
Right, it does. And it's actually important because it shows how fluid sexual orientation could be. Like, someone might mostly identify as straight but still be attracted to the same gender sometimes.
Okay, so we're seeing it's not a simple choice at all. But
Yeah.
how far back does all this go historically? Is this just a modern thing we're figuring out?
Not even close. Ancient Greece is a perfect example. Their whole view of sexuality was totally different from what we often see in, like, Western societies today. Having same-sex relationships wasn't just okay, it was a normal part of society. Sometimes even celebrated. Can you believe that?
Wow, that's wild. Really shows how much societal norms can change over time. And speaking of changing how we see things, some of our research talked about, get this, animals. Apparently, homosexuality has been seen in hundreds of animal species. Hundreds.
It's true. And it really makes you think twice about what natural even means when it comes to sexuality, right? Like, if animals are doing it, and we usually think they just go by instinct, then how do we define those words, natural and unnatural, when we talk about humans?
That's a really good point. So let's say, just for argument's sake, that for some people, sexual orientation could be a choice. Does that change anything about how we should treat people?
That's where ethics comes in, big time. Even if it were a choice for some, it doesn't erase the experiences of millions of LGBTQ people. We have to lead with respect, trying to understand, and treating each other with dignity no matter what.
Absolutely. It
Yeah.
all comes down to recognizing that everyone has inherent worth, no matter who they're attracted to.
Exactly. That's what should guide us in everything we do, don't you think?
You know, thinking about how different cultures throughout history viewed all this, it really makes you realize how much culture plays a role. It's easy to get caught up in like the science and psychology of it all, but cultural norms are huge too, right?
Huge, absolutely. What's considered normal or even acceptable when we talk about sexuality, it changes so much depending on where you are in the world and in what time period. We talked about ancient Greece, but there are tons of examples like that throughout history.
So how do we fit those cultural differences together with the biology and psychology we've been talking about? It seems like a lot to put together.
It is, and it comes back to this. Nature and nurture are totally woven together. Like, Our biology might give us a starting point, but then our environment, and that includes the culture we grew up in, that shapes how we see and express our sexuality.
Which reminds me, we had those personal stories from LGBTQ people in our research. They talked about feeling different when they were really young, even before they knew what sexual orientation was.
Those stories are so powerful. They really get to the heart of this idea that for a lot of people, being gay or straight, it's not a choice they're making. They're talking about feelings and attractions they had way before they even had the words to describe them.
It really makes you think about how much of who we are is, I don't know, decided for us. It's
Mhm.
not really a choice. Like, think of a little kid, right?
Yeah.
They don't choose their favorite color. It's just something they're drawn to,
That's a great way to put it. And for some, those feelings about who they're attracted to, who they are, those are there from a very young age. It's just a part of them.
which makes you think, if it was a choice, why would anyone choose to be bullied or disowned by their families even? That's a lot to go through if it were just a choice.
Hmm. It is, and it's a really strong argument against this whole idea that it's a choice. It shows how incredibly strong LGBTQ people are, going through so much just for being themselves.
Makes you think about the courage it takes to live openly as gay or a lesbian in a world that doesn't always accept that. Speaking of which, our research mentioned the Kinsey Institute. They've been doing this sex research for decades, haven't they?
They have, and they've been so important in challenging how society sees things, promoting real scientific research on sexuality. They weren't afraid to talk about things that were considered off limits back then, and what they found out has really changed how we understand sexual orientation.
What struck me about the Kinsey Institute was how much they focused on understanding instead of judging. That seems like it was really important to them from the start.
It was. They've always been about looking at sexuality in a more nuanced way, with compassion, recognizing that everyone's different. Their work has helped to make same-sex attraction less taboo and promote acceptance.
It's amazing how much progress has been made for LGBTQ people in terms of rights and acceptance. But we're not there yet, are we?
Not by a long shot. There's still a long way to go, both in terms of laws protecting LGBTQ people and just how people think.
That's true. It's like a reminder that we can't just sit back and think everything's okay now. We have to keep fighting for equality, keep challenging discrimination when we see it.
Exactly. And that means challenging our own biases, too. You know what I mean? The biases we might not even realize we have.
Totally. It's like this constant learning process, unlearning and growing.
Yeah, and a big part of that is being willing to have these kinds of conversations, talking about tough issues with curiosity and being open to changing our minds.
I couldn't agree more. This deep dive has been, I don't know about you, but it's been really eye-opening for me. And I feel like we're just scratching the surface. Wow, we really went deep on this one. From brain studies to ancient Greece to the Kinsey Institute.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey, hasn't it? Really shows you how complex this whole question is. Like, when you really start digging into it, just saying it's a choice or it's not doesn't cover it. Sexuality is so much more than that.
It's like those optical illusions, you look at it one way and you see one thing, but then you look again and bam, there's a whole other image there.
Perfect analogy. It's all about shifting your perspective, being willing to see things in a new way.
Exactly. So yeah, after all this research, the personal stories, the history, the culture, what's the biggest thing that stands out to you? What do you hope our listeners are really thinking about right now?
Honestly, it goes back to how much nature and nurture are both involved. It's not like we choose who we're attracted to any more than we choose our eye color, right? It's about understanding that who we are, it's a mix of our biology, our experiences, all those social and cultural things that shape us.
And when you really get that, it changes how you see other people, doesn't it?
It has to. If we accept that sexual orientation is a fundamental part of who a person is, then it makes sense that everyone deserves to be themselves, to be treated with dignity and respect, no matter who they love.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
And that idea of respect and acceptance, that's what the Kinsey Institute's all about, isn't it?
100%. What they've done to challenge prejudice and help people see sexuality in a more informed and compassionate light, it's been huge.
So as we kind of come up for air on this deep dive, any final thoughts? Something for our listeners to chew on as they go about their day?
How about this? We see so much variation in sexual behavior in animals, right? And we think of animals as going mostly on instinct. So does that make us question how we define what's natural when it comes to human love and attraction?
Wow, that's a powerful question to leave everyone with. It really makes you think.
It does, and hopefully it makes us all a little more curious, a little more empathetic, a little more open to challenging what we think we know.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Hope you found it as thought-provoking as we did. Until next time, keep those minds open and keep asking those big questions.